I'm just replaying this. Sandra, I think we're good to go.
Okay, great. Did you want to introduce me, or I should?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna get going. The thing is, now that we're in this format, it's tracking how the questions come in. So my name's Jennifer Smith. I'm with CMC Canada, and I'm moderating today's session. So thank you everyone for joining. We have a bit of a lag, so hopefully everybody's on. Basically, we have about 50 minutes, just shy of that. We're hoping Sandra will do about 40-minute presentations and then 10-minute questions and answers. There is an opportunity to vote on questions, and I will be posing them, and she's going to respond back. Everything is recorded because people generally have questions about that. You'll be sent a link, and it'll be available on CVent for 90 days and then on the Digital Transformation YouTube channel. Again, pose your questions, and we'll look forward to the discussion. So I'd like to introduce Sandra Toews. She's currently the director of the School of Information Management, the Faculty of Management at Dalhousie University. Her research involves examining how people and groups find and integrate information to successfully accomplish knowledge-based work tasks and to help design tools and practices that facilitate and enhance these processes. She's involved in previous work involving the knowledge work and examining the effects of interruptions on search. And prior to her academic career, she was also an information professional in the finance and information service industries. So today we're inviting Sandra to basically present some of the research that she has been doing. She's been gathering evidence to better understand how the shift in to digital is changing the core skills and competencies required by a government. The project that she did do involved the training needs analysis survey, which was administered across governments across Canada and consultations with senior leaders. So today we're inviting her to present those findings and open it up for discussion. So I pass it over to you, Sandra.
Great. Thank you very much, Jennifer, and welcome everyone. So today I want to focus very much on a case study looking at the federal government in Canada and our work with them to really kind of uncover not only what the digital skills that are necessary are, but to really kind of dig in and understand what the capacity is in the government. But one of the most interesting things is, of course, we did this work just prior to COVID. So a lot of the things that we were looking for and talking about have of course been affected by COVID. So what I'd like you to do today is take you through our process, tell you about our results and findings, and then reflect a bit about how COVID has, moved some things along, made other things more important, and sort of changed the landscape slightly. And I know for this conference, there's been a lot of thought about the words around digital, but I just wanted to start by sort of talking a bit about this whole term digital transformation. I'm sure everyone in the audience, you will have your views on what it means, and more importantly, how this is impacting you. But I wanted to pause here because it seems like sometimes, kind of like the diagram here shows, we're being told that there's some kind of magical digital wand. And if we can just wave it, that everything will be transformed. So a critical part of what we were trying to do and to understand in the context of the federal government of Canada was what specific competencies are needed, how and where are these skills being developed and taught, and how, more importantly, will they lead to this kind of transformation that we're all looking for. So even to take something very, very simple, for example, obviously, like all of you, most of my last 2 years has been about dealing with COVID and moving things online. So moving our program online. And it was not just about throwing up the same slides we always used online. We had to really rethink the whole process and reassess what we do, why we do it, and how we do it to try and really transform the student experience. As you can imagine, some things worked surprisingly well. And of course, some things did not go as well. But we started thinking about designing the context about where our students might be, the challenges they might have. So things like accessibility, of course, came front and center. So for example, one of the courses I teach is a course called Management Without Borders. And we created short videos, which included our scripts and put them up in multiple formats. So you could watch the video, you could look at the PowerPoints with the scripts, or you could just look at the slides. To do this, we used some new tools, we worked collaboratively, we relied on best practices that were emerging. We listened to the feedback received from students as we, from the initial stages of moving things online, but we recognized that in some ways we could not see our audience to see their reactions and modify in real time, but we could offer new features. So this likely mirrors your experiences. To me, this really highlighted the whole idea that digital transformation involves starting from a different place and really thinking about what we can do differently using technology to support our work and how we can better support diversity, accessibility. How can we continuously evaluate and adapt? When is it critical to have those synchronous experiences? And how do we ensure that we're getting the feedback we need? So as we're moving through, the case study, I want us to think about both what we found, but also how our lives have definitely changed over the past while with COVID. So back when we began this study in a pre-COVID sense, really we were asked to do a very big thing, to recognize that this digital transformation provides opportunities to understand how we can, do things like create policy directly with people in ways that we've never done before. And also through using things like intellect data sets and engaging the public in new ways. And as we were working with the Canadian Digital Service, we really recognized that the new skill set relates to data science, network analysis, social networking, social media, crowdsourcing, foresight techniques, in addition to all the traditional skills that you would have within the government. So our goals were quite powerful to better understand and empirically, so we wanted to have real evidence, assess the current training needs for digital disciplines right across the Government of Canada, to provide insights as to how the Government of Canada can adapt and develop digital training for a more modern workplace and to enhance service delivery. And really, we were doing this for, we say all of the Government of Canada, but we were particularly interested in public servants who design or deliver digital services and solutions, public servants who impact digital service delivery in policy or operational positions. And of course, we also wanted to collect the thoughts and ideas of senior leaders and decision makers. So we started this with a number of guiding research questions. So we really wanted to, and again, you can use different language here, but we decided to use this term of digital disciplines. So what are the core areas that were necessary for governments to thrive in a digital area? We wanted to understand to what extent those skills were already present in the Government of Canada. We wanted to understand how the training needs were being perceived. So do employees feel like they had enough opportunity to learn the new skills, and how they could provide more training going forward. And we also wanted to recognize that we're trying to study something that is moving as we studied it. So when we were doing this, we could not have envisioned COVID, but really that is an excellent example of, we are trying to do something, and at the same time, there's massive shifts in the world that mean what we're studying is changing. So as we began our work, we were guided by these specific questions, but we also really wanted to make sure that we were collecting data in a variety of different ways. So as I'm going to go into when I outline our research protocol, it involved both collecting survey data and doing interviews. We also wanted to make sure that we were not doing this in a vacuum. So our work really fit into everything else that was going on in the government at that time, in terms of the recognition that workplace development and digital literacy were recognized as foundational. We wanted to very much have a Made in Canada approach. So we looked around to see what skills inventories had been done. And really, we found two things: that there was not one universal one, but also that it was really important to try and do this in context of what was going on within the Government of Canada. We wanted to also, harness the IT workforce already in government by thinking about how we could enable innovation from within and addressing skills gap around things like user-centric design and agile development. We also wanted to recognize, as the government was, the need for broader digital literacy. So this tied in with the creation of the Canadian Digital Service and the launch of the Digital Academy. So what did we do? As all good researchers, we did an environmental scan to see what else was going on globally. Obviously, there are, a number, all countries are working on this, as well as there's a lot of digital tools and scorecards that we can use as well. Because we really wanted to be able to empirically understand the skills level within the government, we designed a randomized survey. But another core part of this research was to make sure that everybody's voice could be heard. So in addition to a randomized survey, we also opened up the survey to all employees and invited them to take part as well. A key part of our work and part that I was directly involved with was consultations with senior leaders, so CIOs, top leaders, and in particular in departments that had a large digital mandate. So the whole idea of our research was actually built on the principles of digital. So it was user-centered, it was collaborative. We worked very closely through the Canadian Digital Service with the departments within the federal government, with Treasury Board. Everything was open, and of course, we made it as accessible as possible. So all of our work was really designed to follow digital principles. In terms of the scope, so for our work, we were, as I mentioned, trying to do something quite unique, obtain feedback very broadly from across the government, focusing on those who were in service departments. So the randomized survey went to the Canada Revenue Agency, Employment and Social Development, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, National Defence, Shared Service Canada, Transport Canada, and Veterans Affairs Canada. So those 7 departments. In terms of, as I mentioned, the open one, we then made that broadly open across the government. For our senior leader consultations, we met with CIOs from Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, Shared Services Canada, the Public Service Commission, Transport Canada, Veterans Affairs, Department of National Defence, Canada Revenue Agency, Employment and Social Development Canada, and Canada Border Services Agency. So we had, incredible access through the Canadian Digital Services to these top leaders and time to really ask them what their views were on not only the skill sets needed, but how they saw digital in terms of their departments and their goals. So overall, to look at this together, in summarize, we did an environmental scan that helped us to create the survey, and we pulled the quantitative analysis from the survey, and at the same time, we pulled the qualitative analysis from both the open-ended questions in the survey and from the interviews with senior leaders. So we pulled all of this together, leading to our recommendations. So I'm going to go through some of our key findings next. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to sort of pause and think what COVID did to some of those findings and talk about sort of the way forward in terms of this digital skills framework. I wanted to talk a minute or two about the survey and how we really put this together. So as I mentioned, we worked very closely, not only with the Canadian Digital Services, but with key departments within the government. So the development of the survey was really a co-creation. And we really identified what we called 30 different digital disciplines. So those are sort of skill sets that we thought people needed, and they were clustered around 5 key concepts. So I'm sure none of these concepts are a surprise to you, but as I also mentioned earlier, we really did want to design a made for Canada approach. So these were key concepts that the government had identified they felt were critical. So we asked questions about agile and agile methods, about the ways we can develop products digitally, about how digital creates a new set of issues around privacy and security. We also very much ask questions around data skills, whether that's analytics, visualization, artificial intelligence, all of those pieces as well. And the 5th critical area was user experience, recognizing that in a digital world, that user experience is critical to everything that we do. So I know this might be very hard to read, but I did just want to show you all 30 of the different digital disciplines that we asked about. So the titles and the definitions are here. At the end of my talk, I also do have a link where you can see our report, and you can also see all the data that we collected. So you can really dig into this in greater detail if you wanted to. So as you can see, we had things around agile that related to agile development, continuous deployment, automated testing, accessibility audits, those sorts of things. We also very much asked about open source standards, about cybersecurity, about privacy procedures. We asked specific things about business intelligence tools, data visualization, machine learning, and data science, as well as broadly people's familiarity and understanding of things like design thinking, user research, content design, and user interface design. So those were the disciplines that we created. And I just wanted to really highlight that this is also unique in that we created these for the federal government with the Canadian federal government to really try and reflect and represent what they thought were critical moving forward. And then what we did with this survey is we tried to get a sense of where employees felt like they were getting these skills or already had these skills, where training was available to them, and where they felt like they needed more. So that represents what we did with this survey. In terms of the semi-structured interviews, we really started by asking a very broad question. So we asked the leaders if they thought there was a coherent and distinct set of digital skills that was emerging within the public service, and we just wanted them to describe this in their own words. We wanted their opinion on what they saw. As you know, we gave them those 30 definitions. We asked them to kind of mark it up, write on it, really give us our sense as what they saw the key emerging digital demands were going to be, and then ask their opinion on the digital skill gap in the public service, and if they felt there was sufficient training resources to meet these needs. So, you know, we then, of course, analyzed both the data that came from the survey and the interviews. And as I mentioned, the survey, in addition to having a lot of quantitative data, did also give people open-ended questions. So we analyzed that data as well. And to give you a sense of the breadth of this, for the randomized survey across the 7 departments, we had 600 completed surveys and 385 partially completed. And in some ways, when you look at the response rate, it's only 10%. But it was enough to be statistically significant. So we were able to actually say things with the data. In terms of the open survey, we had 990 employees complete that, as well as a large number who started it. And I will obviously, you know, talk about the fact we did have a lot of people start and not complete the survey. The survey did read as a very technical survey. Some people felt that was a bit challenging. And so that in itself tells us something about what we need to do about digital and how we need to make sure we're not just thinking about it in terms of technology, but also thinking about it in terms of culture shift and attitude shift. I also, as I mentioned, interviewed 23 senior leaders from 10 different departments. So what did we find from all this data? What we found was really quite interesting. So when we looked across those 30 different disciplines, we found that some could be classified as established. So these were disciplines where both people in computer science and non-computer science backgrounds really did both say, yes, I know what this is, what this skill is, and I'm either using it now or I expect to use it. So examples were things like data visualization and cybersecurity. So those were some of the 30 competencies that people really felt like, yes, I understand these and I'm either using them or expect to use them. Emergent disciplines were those where there was a high level of use among computer science employees, but within non-CS employees, they weren't as widely recognized. So we found things like agile development and user experience design. People within CS were very familiar with them and knew how to use them, but beyond CS, they were not as well known. Specialized were areas where there was moderate level of use from computer science people, but low levels of familiarity within the wider computer science. So as in comparison to emergent, specialized is where you had just a group of people within the computer science who were really familiar with it, and the wider computer science audience was not as familiar. And we also found there were some areas where people recognized we absolutely need to know about this, but they weren't really sure about how it might be applied or useful in their work. So for example, everyone seemed to have some level of understanding of artificial intelligence, but what they didn't seem to have is how artificial intelligence was going to affect them in their day-to-day job. So just to dig a little deeper in terms of capacities. So at a basic level, there was some good news. We found that within the federal government, and this was back in 2019, we found that there were sufficient skills and capacities for all 30 disciplines across both computer science and non-CS staff. And this was at what was, we asked people to categorize, so this was at a basic level. But it started to get a little fuzzier as we moved to the more advanced level. We found enough skills and knowledge for some disciplines, but there was very little in the way of excess capacity. So the concern there is it makes the government very vulnerable. If key employees leave, it might mean that you no longer have capacities in these areas. And I think more, something we really also wanted to point out or suggest needed to be looked at is for the non-computer science population. We only found enough advanced skills to meet the demands in the following disciplines. So, privacy and security seem to be doing quite well, and data visualization. But for the rest, for the other 20 odd disciplines, we did not find either advanced skills to meet the capacity. And for the computer science population, we only found a sufficient level of advanced capacity for the following disciplines. So the ones listed there, we did find sufficient level, but that means there was a large number where we did not see a sufficient level of capacity. When we dug into questions around training, did people feel like they had the training opportunities they needed? What did they think of, were they offered training virtually? How was it done? All of those sorts of things. We found that overwhelmingly people within the federal government said that their ability to have training was linked to how important that skill was in terms of their job. So this actually raised an interesting point, because if people's job descriptions did not explicitly lay out digital skills, then they felt they were not often given opportunities for the training that they might have. This also, led us to kind of look at the fact this close association of relevance to active use. You might need to look at how we're going to change this as we move through. So this lack of opportunity or lack of knowledge of opportunity was a reported barrier that many people mentioned, so that they didn't have a good sense of where and how they could get training. Keep in mind, we were doing this when the Digital Academy was just being launched, so things have definitely changed since that point. The other thing we found is, well, online training is obviously, the most convenient, the easiest, but in particular, when you're dealing with the levels of change management required for digital transformation, online training might not be sufficient for those kinds of training opportunities. Through our interviews with the senior leaders, we found many interesting things. So they absolutely agreed with the 30 different digital disciplines that we identified. But what almost every single senior leader also said was that these skills, while we had described them in terms of technical skills, really they were more, in their view, the more important thing was about this mindset change, this culture change. So yes, we can do Agile through a series of different techniques and tools, but Agile is also being willing to embrace new ways of doing things. So they really, we heard time and time again from all the senior leaders, the importance on the soft skills. So thinking about change management, ethics, collaboration, information management, negotiation. And ethics came through very clearly from our senior leader consultations, recognizing that things that might be acceptable, in corporations, the government is held to a higher standard. So, even when we think about recruiting and use of artificial intelligence in recruiting, there's also the need in the government to be very transparent and accountable. So you have to be able to both use tools in novel ways, but make sure that you're still focus on the ethical side of things. So we heard from them, time and time again, that agile is critical, but again, it's more of a mindset. That data is something every employee should really have a good understanding of, how to work with, manipulate, understand data, and user-centered design. So again, we heard that the first priority from the senior leaders was this positioning of digital. The recognition that digital and government is different, that they need to really think about how they are doing this in an accountable, transparent way. We also very much heard about digital as a spectrum, that you're going to move through stages, learn from others, that the importance of sharing digital success stories. And the reality was that as much as organizations that we talked about, the CIOs talked about all the interesting, innovative things they were doing, they also recognized they have legacy systems that still need to be accommodated. So while we're moving on this wonderful digital transformation, there is a reality check there as well. So the emerging trends really identified to us that computer science designates were more likely to have digital training than other types of employees, that lack of knowledge was a key barrier. Other barriers include lack of offerings, lack of local opportunity, lack of time, and that work relevance was the primary motivator for seeking training, and online training resources were overwhelmingly the most common. Just to give you a sense of some of the voices we heard, some of these came from the employees in the open answered questions. A general overview training would be great for people not fully immersed in these elements, but requiring general knowledge. We saw some excitement, enthusiasm. I'm really looking forward to using cloud technology in the workplace. The sooner the better. Training is required on the effective service transformation, on policy development. What will policy development look like? Need training in better data analytics to better understand how it can help and improve my work. To bring it all together, we really felt that the government needed to continue to embrace a digital vision and engage employees in multiple ways across this. That at that very high level, we had to see a broadening and deepening understanding of digital literacy, need for more things like creating digital showcases, really embracing agility and design, cultivating a database culture, prioritizing gender and diversity within digital inclusion, and creating innovative digital training repositories. But also this anticipating and forecasting emerging skills and workplace capabilities as well. So just again, to summarize in a different way, that the Government of Canada must continue to demonstrate a commitment to this digitally enabled public service. The brand, the public service, is a leading edge workplace where skills development and learning are key pillars of their organizational culture. To have regular mechanisms for employee consultation and dialogue in order to engage employees directly in this continual digital effort, and to strengthen the ties across training, innovation, and performance. So simple things like making sure that human resources is involved in looking at job descriptions and adding a digital layer to everyone's job description. So it's very clear where and how they should be receiving training. Data management and analysis emerged as critical skills. So understanding how to manage and work with data is essential to everyone. And this ties in with the work that's already going on within the Government of Canada. So in terms of training reform, We're recommending the way to measure and refine, create differentiated training streams, so different for computer science versus non-CS, but also opportunities to bring people together in teams to learn together, because many of the digital skills need to be done in consultation. That integration of the digital and the human resource processes to ensure that people can access the skills they need. A more proactive training culture, developing a suite of digital training offering and channels, applying a gender-based analysis and diversity assessment tool to enhance things, and deepening intergovernmental collaboration. So we have the 30 different disciplines, so we can now continue to benchmark and develop maps. And based on ongoing feedback and review, the disciplines should be expanded to incorporate non-technical aspects, so those softer skills that we heard so much about. So again, just to summarize, a key barrier that was that employees do not always see how digital connects to their work. So we really need to think about how that can be changed within human resources processes. But then, as we know, COVID hit. And many things that were not even considered within government, such as remote working, working from home, access to systems from home, using virtual tools to have meetings. All of this, of course, became the norm. So looking at research on what has happened since then, we really recognize that, telework has become normal. All employees are much more familiar, probably more familiar than they want to be, with virtual tools and virtual teams. Accessing information and data from the cloud, obviously those skills have increased, as well as thinking about accessibility and designing for accessibility and working with open tools. So just to kind of think about where we came from and where we're going, we need to continually, in terms of a new digital skills framework, we want to ensure that the Government of Canada continues to be leaders in the digital conversation. We want to ensure that really there is this embracing of agile methods, that we're driving forward data literacy, we're highlighting privacy and security, we're emphasizing open source techniques and tools, and thinking very much about this focus on ethics in everything we do. As I mentioned, our full report is available through this link, and we also do have the data available there as well. So I'm very interested to hear sort of your reflections on, as I said, we collected this data before COVID, how your understanding of digital skills might have changed, and where you see the priorities are moving forward. So I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sandra, for that detailed presentation. This is my first time using this, and there is a bit of a lag to the live discussion, but very helpful, went very well. There is a question. I have a couple myself, so we can run through those. One person posted, it was Dan, existing HR role profiles seem outdated and inefficient, e.g. programmer, analyst. Is there a published set of recommended standards of Government of Canada role profiles that includes these new digital skills?
That is an excellent question. So I have not seen anything, but that would be a strong recommendation that we made when we wrote the report, and I would still push for, because exactly as you said, if you have job descriptions and people are being kind of measured on things that don't actually incorporate these digital skills, then you aren't going to see the opportunities for training, and you aren't going to see the recognition of the need for new skills. So, certainly that's something that I will follow up on, but I would encourage you to also, work within wherever your department is or wherever you are to really push back and ask for that to be done. Because it is a really critical part of this piece in this puzzle.
Okay, perfect. I must say, changing those job descriptions is a heavy lifting endeavor for sure. So we have another question. One person, Nada, has said your point here is pretty critical, aligning job descriptions, the skill sets and training and the job title. What she's saying is what they're seeing is more open-ended job descriptions because the new skill sets do not always map to the current workforce. And just wondering what you would see as the results on the job market. How do you integrate what you're saying if they're moving to sort of more open and more, I guess, general types of job descriptions?
No, these are excellent questions. And just to reflect, first of all, recognizing how much work goes into changing those job descriptions. So, Dalhousie, which is, significantly smaller than the Government of Canada. But I know when I try and change someone's job description here, it is a process that involves multiple meetings with HR, lots of different evidence. So that can seem like this is not achievable. But I think as the second question points out, it is clear that we are needing employees that have more sort of general skills, and so that the job descriptions are opening up. So I think what we can expect to see, and I think that the push is going to come. So, we are hopefully graduating students from university that all have a certain level of digital skills. So as they enter the workplace, hopefully they're going to help us kind of push this agenda forward and recognize that, no matter where you're hired, you absolutely are going to have to understand, how to work with data. That people who had very deep and incredible skills around policy development, do also have to work with those that, know how to crowdsource, opinions and thoughts and work with social media data to really try and understand how society is changing in different ways. So, I would say that I think COVID actually helped us a lot in these ways, because now we've opened up this whole idea that people, can work in hybrid modes, that not everybody will come back to the workplace. And so as soon as we do that, we're kind of opening things up to thinking about work in a different way, thinking about job descriptions in a different way. So I think we are going to see significant change over the next couple of years, but I'm not under any illusions about the ease of changing, large human resource systems.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So you answered my question. One of my questions was the role of academia in creating a greater digital literacy, and that's sort of in the current, like the upcoming, crop of new talent. But one of the questions I had, and it's going back to your defining digital, and you had sort of those 5 key areas, given the high failure rate of digital transformation initiatives, particularly in government, among the 5 areas, and in your research, how much did you really focus on? I think you probably had digital and project management, but I really think about it, and you talk about change management in leadership. Like, leaders don't generally come from computer backgrounds, but they have to make critical decisions. We can go to Phoenix, we can give lots of examples that didn't work. And it'll come down to sort of that project management oversight of the critical decisions being made with maybe not having some of those critical competencies. So I'm just wondering if you looked at sort of the more management leadership level and those critical competencies.
No, that's an excellent question. And, as I said, this was an interesting process for me as an academic, because we went in, based on our environmental scan, and had a list of digital disciplines that were slightly different than the ones we ended up with. So, absolutely the ones we ended up, especially in the survey, looking at were the ones that the government was most interested in sort of hearing about. But what I was really encouraged about what I heard from because I was involved in the interviewing of the senior leaders, and every single one of them started by looking at those disciplines and saying, yes, while these are necessary, the more important thing is exactly what you said, the ability to recognize that what we want people to do is not just recreate their job in an online, but to really think about how we do things differently. And that involves, change management, project management, all those kind of key, those skills. So I think in the senior leadership, there's a key recognition around that. And that was something that we really, in our recommendations, pushed for this to be raised higher. Because I do think that you can always train people on the technical skills, but it is more those tough, process level. And the interesting thing about sort of my work is that, very much, in my previous background before being an academic, I worked in the financial services industry. So I saw waves of new technologies come in there and not have the transformational effect people thought they would. So I think you really also have to stand back and recognize, you mentioned the process, but it's also the people, so that there is this whole ecosystem that has to change. And I think, working on the soft skills is absolutely critical. So one of the things that we discussed, and I think could be really interesting, is even in the training, having people not be trained with people that are in the same job as them, but bringing together people to work on a project, who have different skill sets, so that you're actually in your learning simulating what the reality would be in to actually bring across these projects. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, perfect. Yeah, it is across the board, and interesting in terms of how senior leaders felt, in terms of their role and their digital acuity or literacy themselves. So we pretty well reached the end. I definitely would like to thank you on behalf of the conference and of the participants today for making this excellent presentation. For everyone, there will be copies, so you can get it through Cvent of the presentation. So you can get the link through there, or you can jot it down now. So I think we break now for lunch. I'm just looking at my agenda here. So we break for lunch and back at 12:30, where again, we go into breakout groups, and they're pretty consistent in terms of the different streams. And yeah, so thank you very much.
Yep. And I'll just mention, because for some reason it isn't on the slide, my email is just stoze@dal.ca. So really happy to answer any questions, or if people have other ideas for research they'd like to see done, happy to chat.
Perfect. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the day, the conference, everyone. We'll see you back.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to try and take us offline.